Professor Uli Sauerland is the Vice Director and the leader of the Semantics Pragmatics Department at the Leibniz Center General Linguistics in Berlin. So thank you so much for joining us, and you can share your screen.
So I'll talk today about how language relates to other systems of communication. And here, compositionality is a central notion. So I'll first introduce you to compositionality, and then how I propose to rethink it. So generally, communication involves sending messages or signals to share information with each other. So, for example, a red traffic light communicates the information that you should wait at this intersection. What you do with that information is, of course, up to you. Often we find that these signals in communication are not just single signals, but they are complex internally. So made up of components that each carry meaning. And here's an example of that. The red cyclist has both a shape and the red color. And this tells you that you should wait. But then the shape tells you that the signal addresses cyclists. The components of this signal can vary independently of each other. A green cyclist still addresses cyclists, but tells you that they are allowed to go. And there are many variations of that, so pedestrian signals or even horse riding signals. What doesn't change is how these two components of the signal are combined with one another. Namely, that you put an and in between. The green cyclist communicates also that it's addressed at cyclists and then that you are allowed to go. These two components are combined with and conjunctively. A signal can also be complex in the temporal dimension. So you find this in language, of course, but so I might say wave and smile, and thereby inform you that you should do things to wave and to smile. Beyond language, we often can't quite tell what the meaningful pieces are actually. So let's think about music briefly. So individual notes here don't seem to carry meaning, but a melody like da-da-da-da might carry some meaning, or a crescendo or decrescendo might also carry meaning, like you think of bolero. And then I can also combine these two. So I could do like da 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 da. Here you then have again a sort of complex signal that has clearly two components, and these and it seems that you also combine these two components by meaning. So, for example, you might think of this as somebody with a Beethoven hairstyle walked by, passing by. So the crescendo, so this getting louder and then quieter again, meaning as this impression of somebody walking by. Okay, and so again, we have this conjunctive coordination. And in the literature, this is called the trivial compositionality, because this is just basically a side effect of systems having some memory. So you could also in some way construe of two successive vaccinations as sort of communicating to the immune system something. So say you get a shot against rabies, and then another day you get a shot against flu. Your immune system then builds up immunities to both rabies and flu viruses, and so it sort of combines these two signals conjunctively. And but that doesn't mean that your immune system has any sort of internal logic or something that builds up this compositionality. But that's just function of it having a memory. In language, there are clear examples of non-trivial compositionality. So compositionalities that goes kind of beyond just conjoining meanings. So for example, the sentence "it's not sunny," it's not the conjunction of "it's sunny" and "it's not." That means something very different from "it's not sunny." So negation is a very clear case of a part of a linguistic signal that it doesn't conjunctively combine with the rest of the signal, but does something non-trivial or non-conjunctive. And yeah, so this is what I'm mostly am thinking about currently, and I have an idea that is rather simple but novel about how to account for this non-trivial compositionality. And for this, first look at a simpler example. So a girl is running. This also is it's a non-trivial compositionality. If you think that of this as having two components, namely the component that's a girl, which might mean something like there's a girl, and the component is running, which you might take to mean that someone is running. But if you combine these two just by conjunction, there's a girl and someone is running. This could be true, well, in a scenario where there is indeed a girl running, but it also could be true in this other picture that you see here. There's a girl and a man is running there. So, which it doesn't though correspond to the sentence "a girl is running," the second picture. So we have to exclude that in some way. And the idea that I'm pursuing is simply to say, well, in this second picture, there are two entities that sort of serve to make this sentence true. And if you remove one of them, then the conjunction would not be true anymore. If you remove the girl, then it wouldn't be true that there's a girl. If you remove the man, then it wouldn't be true that someone is running in that picture. But in the picture on the left, there's just a girl that is running, and that it's only one entity that kind of serves to make the sentence as a whole true. So we can somehow do with one fewer entity in this to make this true. And so the principle that I'm pursuing is that you only kind of allow satisfying scenarios with the minimal number of logically necessary entities. So that rules out the second picture as kind of a good scenario that this sentence could communicate, and only gives you leaves you with the first picture. Okay. So before I will come, of course there are other proposals, and there's one very prominent other proposal about how to account for compositionality in language. But before I come to that, I wanted to point out two predictions that my proposal makes that I find, though they initially don't seem to quite fit, that they actually argue in favor of it. And one concerns how this proposal can account for transitive verbs. So initially, if you kind of follow the same recipe as I had on the previous slide, a sentence like "a robot is repairing a computer" with this transitive verb could not be accounted for on the proposal. So show this here briefly. So if we have here the sort of, in a similar way, split this up into components. There's a robot for a robot, and then is repairing, meaning something like something is repairing something. And a computer would mean there's a computer. And now we combine could combine these three components in maybe different ways. Only going to look at one possibility here, namely if you combine is repairing first with a computer, then we are looking for minimal situations or minimal states where something is repairing something and there's a computer. But that the minimal way to sort of the minimal number of entities to make this true is to have the computer can repair itself. You would get a meaning that's for just a combination of these two that doesn't allow you anymore, or it's already means something that's incongruous with the sentence the robot is repairing a computer. So we somehow can't easily get the meaning of transitive verbs right on this proposal. And instead we have to kind of further decompose transitive verbs into more pieces that you don't actually see initially when you look at this kind of sentence of a robot is repairing a computer. And namely, I mean, there are still different ways of maybe splitting this into pieces, but one way you can see this is if you have like the pieces of robot, meaning that we had before, but in addition the pieces do and cause here, and the cause meaning one event causes some sub-event or state, and do meaning something like some entity is doing, performing an event or executing an event, then we can model this sentence, or then this can be composed successfully. So then we can combine cause here with repairing a so one crucial difference now is that repairing only is kind of an intransitive component here. An entity is in a repaired state that we can combine with a computer. So a computer is in a repaired state or will be in a repaired state and ultimately. Then we combine this with one event causes a sub-event. And here, because we're sort of talking about this second event being a sub-event, and an event sort of can't logically cause itself, it would force this to be this one event causes the computer to be repaired, and then this can be the event that the robot performs. So that gives us a successful way of counting for transitive verb, but it really has to require this decomposition into pieces. Now, and this decomposition into pieces is actually what linguists overwhelmingly take to be the way to account for transitive verbs in any event. And there are two pieces of evidence I briefly mentioned in favor of this sort of decomposition. On the one hand, there are languages that use complex morphology for many transitive verbs. So list here Japanese, hashiru, hashiresu, Tamil, as kind of, I mean, here now looking at run, not at repair. Tamil has this marker 2, what is and a Salish language, so 3 completely unrelated languages we have here, where the causation is marked by the suffix n here, taken, taken. Okay, and you can also though observe this in European languages when you look at children, and this is a work that I've done with colleagues. We generally think that to some extent the logical structure of languages is to a larger extent innate than before, or at least given, and that you find this in children sometimes when they produce extra pieces of the structure that the adults possibly don't produce. And here's an example from French, from a French 2-year-old child, where it says that instead of, it actually first says this, like an adult would on va le cacher, but then says also on va le faire cacher, both times meaning that we will hide it, and whatever the it is, and what, oh, okay. And so we see here that also this decomposition shows up in the child language. Okay. Another kind of possible worry that ultimately, the way that, initially you might think that a caterpillar ate a caterpillar, which would be kind of the paraphrase for how we would account here for that it's a minimal situation that this should be true, should be a caterpillar eating itself, but but the two sentences have different meanings. But there are actually there are actually cases where you have sort of an indefinite appearing in either the subject or the object position as an indefinite, and this being interpreted in the either as an reflexive or as an indefinite. So the C pronouns or similar pronouns also in the Slavic languages can be used both as a reflexive as here in Anna si lava on the right, but also as a kind of generic subject, indefinite subject. So si e contenti, meaning people are happy. And this would follow from this minimization behavior that we derive the meaning of Anna si lava from Anna is washing someone, but then this would require a minimal state here to be making that true. So that would be Anna washing herself. And now coming back to a caterpillar ate a caterpillar, this would then involve, in this case, the representation would be more complex than just a caterpillar ate itself, and this would induce a reference, would block then a caterpillar ate a caterpillar from having the reflexive meaning. Okay, now, so this is sort of the proposal, and you've seen some initial evidence for this. And now I come to comparing this with the sort of dominant idea for how to account for compositionality, which in some sense goes back to work by the mathematician Frege in the 19th century. Here the idea is that certain entities, certain parts of a sentence can denote functions, mathematical functions. So if you look at the example, the boy is swimming, the idea is that swimming can be a function mapping entities to truth values, so to true or false. And then the sentence meaning is arrived at by applying swimming to the entity, the boy. And this our knowledge of the sentence meaning is accounted for by this formula. And this is different in a number of ways from the proposal I'm pursuing. I should say that it's a very successful proposal and has led to good formal accounts of many phenomena and precise understanding in this domain of how sentences arrive at a meaning. My criticism of it is mostly that it's just very unrestricted, and compared to the proposal that I'm pursuing, it does not make any predictions of the same type. So would be no problem to have a function have functions that take two arguments for a transitive verb without any decomposition, for example. One possible advantage where it is not, where it seems different in restrictiveness, would be that this function swimming here, or that a verb denotes, if it's doesn't have an argument. It's kind of predicted not to have any useful meaning, but just being some abstract function. And there are phenomena like that if you drop an argument of a verb, you have a deviant sentence. So you see here in one, a bird devoured a caterpillar. It's a good sentence of English, but a bird devoured does not sound like a native English speaker, at least. And yeah, on this, my thinking is that, I mean, there are also, on the other hand, predicates in English that don't have this transitive that can be used either intransitively or transitively. A bird ate, or a bird ate a caterpillar. And furthermore, I mean, this property of requiring in this case, an object argument varies across languages. So in Ewe, the verb for eat has to obligatorily occur with some object. So you have to put the object sing, and if you leave that out in 4, that's not a good Ewe sentence. So a bird ate doesn't work, or this is, a bird ate doesn't work in Ewe as it does in English. So this property of eat or devour and wouldn't be something that we want to intimately build into the meaning of these verbs, it seems to me, but should be more accounted for in some kind of need for pronouncing here the object sing, and then in English you don't have to pronounce it, but there might be also an object, a bird ate something there, and you just do not pronounce the something. Okay, another advantage that I see for this, or attraction that I see, but I kind of struggle a bit still to, is that in the evolutionary perspective, it's sort of more continuous with this notion of trivial compositionality that I introduced at the beginning, because it means, my proposal is, well, you have just the trivial compositionality, but then you kind of apply this minimization to a constituent formed by trivial compositionality. And I mean, at some point, I mean, we don't know quite when this happened, but in human history, people, prehistory, I mean, in the development of the human race, this ability to use language must have evolved. And there's a lot of work currently on compositionality in animal communication. Interesting work, and there's actually a workshop here at the center in February that I will be involved in organizing on compositionality and communication, covering monkeys and birds and bees. And there's also work like finding that, I mean, so, but the current state of this debate is largely that there may be a few isolated occurrences of something that counts as compositionality in monkeys and some bird species. But on the other hand, we have humans, and there people have demonstrated that even 7 months old can do some composition, namely can understand negation quite fluently. So but then sort of at some point this must have evolved in humans and maybe in other species and thing. But one sort of constraint on this, I mean, that is kind of hard to see from in the perspective where compositionality involves function, is that then functions has these meanings that don't have any use on their own. But in the evolution of this new way of communicating, or this new ability to communicate, you have to imagine that there were a few individuals who had involved this advanced communication ability that you see here in color, surrounded by a lot of individuals that didn't have this advanced communication ability, they must still have been able to sort of communicate with these less advanced people who could not understand these, in this case, function application possibly, but these more complex signals. And so it's easier to see on a proposal where the ability is more strongly based on trivial composition, how this could have progressed, that these people who have evolved this ability would still be able to communicate successfully with species like with the other individuals in the community. Okay, so I will conclude with that. So I introduced you to compositionality and 3 concepts in total, but primarily this minimization-based way of compositionality that is somewhere more powerful than trivial compositionality, but less powerful than lambda calculus, and that's what I'm interested in currently. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Lorraine.
Thank you very much, Uli. My question may just show a basic misunderstanding of compositionality, but apropos of your final point about the possible evolutionary history of compositionality, I remember the research that was done some decades ago on communication among vervet monkeys, which had specialized warning calls for different kinds of danger. So a snake was different from an eagle, for example. And I wonder whether or not the possibility of compositionality in a language, or perhaps it's too much to call the vervet monkey system a language, but it's much more flexible. So the vervet monkeys have they have no composition. They have a specialized cry for a very particular kind of situation. And the compositionality seems to offer immense possibilities for expansion and flexibility. And it makes me wonder about other compositional elements. So, for example, French has a proper future, j'irai, but English does not. It has a composite future, I will go. German has a composite future, ich werde gehen, ich werde fahren. I mean, are there other inferences that can be drawn from these patterns of compositionality about languages more generally?
Yeah, thank you. The vervet monkeys are right on target for the part of it. And I mean, they are actually being actively studied, several species of monkeys. And here, this is a Diana monkey, which is maybe the most sophisticated. And they do have like the system of alarm calls, 3 or 4. And I mean, here the research has been sort of going back and forth on the compositionality, and the progress is largely driven by a better formal understanding also what compositionality would mean in this. So one example from the Diana monkeys is that they initially, one of the researchers proposed that they have something that means negation, because if they precede their alarm calls with a kind of boom that they can make with air sacs, then the alarm calls are ignored by the species mate. So normally when there's a leopard alarm call, they climb up the tree, but then when it's preceded by the boom, they don't.
But is the implication that these monkeys have irony? This is a joke?
Well, that is, in a sense, kind of a nosy understanding that this boom indicates not I mean, it's not negation, but it rather indicates something like, well, we are not in a dangerous situation, and then the following sounds are interpreted as at least not as alarm calls, but as I mean, maybe drawing your. I mean, then it's not known really what actually. I think how these monkeys then interpret these alarm calls once they follow a boom, but they serve more of a maybe social function or something. But there's sort of the natural state of the monkeys when there's not this boom call. Then the natural state of the monkeys is to be very worried, and where's the danger coming from? And then this indication, oh, there's a danger coming on the ground, or like from a leopard, immediately leads to this alarmed reaction. But once it's preceded by the boom, then it sort of shifts the context and says, well, now we are not in a situation where there's any danger. And you might call that maybe irony, but I mean, as I don't know any research really that then investigates how the monkeys actually interpret these subsequent alarm calls. This other question, I mean, with the sort of synthetic and analytic forms, or that sometimes you have variation even there within a language. If you think about the English comparatives, like happier, but more content and not contenter as the variation. I mean, this does play some role in the system, but this is mostly concerned sort of the visible. I mean, it's in both cases it's this being thought about of being ultimately compositional in two pieces, but just that what is different is the visibility of the two pieces in this sort of spoken signal, in the language signal.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. If not, last chance. All right. Yes. If not, thank you so much, Uli, for the talk, and everyone for your comments and questions. Thank you everyone for attending.